The trade report is not only a document that shows how much Nigeria is importing and exporting, but the document has vital metrics to assess trade trends across all business sectors. To share more insight about Nigeria's trade with the rest of the world is Babajide Ogunsanya, founder of Leadership by Data and, of course, Channels Television's data analyst. Joins us from our Abuja studios. Great to have you, Babajide, on the News at 10 once again.
The pleasure is all mine.
All right, so let's get into it. How much has Nigeria's trade result changed in the last 6 months? What can you tell us? What are the facts, Babajide?
Just before we go into the facts, I'd like to start from just a slightly different perspective, and that's because 14.5 dozen years ago, it was the French philosopher and writer Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Karr that said, "Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose." In English, he was saying that the more things change, the more they remain the same. And these are the facts if we take a look at Nigeria's trade position, especially if we compare the results of second quarter with the results of the third quarter. And that's how I'd like us to start. Let's take a look at the snapshot of the trading indicators that were presented by the National Bureau of Statistics, because that will allow us to understand what the French philosopher Jean-Baptiste was saying when he said, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So if we take a look at that, here's what you will find, especially if we start from the second quarter of this year, April to June. Yes, the NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, said we exported total exports 7 trillion naira. We imported 5.7 trillion naira, which showed a total trade position of 12.7 trillion naira. However, the implication means that 55% of our total trade we exported, which seemed to be some good news. In simple terms, our exports as a ratio of total trade, 55%. That was in the second quarter of the year. But in the third quarter of the year, despite exporting more than we did in the second quarter, an export of 10.3 trillion naira, we imported as much, 8.4 trillion naira. And so, our export trade as a ratio of our total trade remains at 55%. So in simple terms, the second quarter of this year and the third quarter of the year remains approximately the same. That is the situation we find ourselves today. The numbers might look different, but the situation shows that our exports relative to the size of our total trade remains the same as it was in the second quarter of the year.
All right, so Babajide, this trade report... Yes, because we really don't have much time, but I just want to ask you this next question, and perhaps you can chip in your thoughts, analysis, and as we go on. Now, this trade report actually shows that Nigeria is exporting more goods than it's importing, yet the economy is growing rather slowly. It's not growing high enough or below its potential. Why do you think this is the case?
This is the case because there are three things to look at. Yes, we need to look at our performance on oil. But we also need to critically look at what has happened in the agricultural sector, and we need to look at what happened in the manufacturing sector. And if we take a look at that data, it clearly allows us to understand the challenges the president will face in 2024. Because the data speaks to the facts, and the data makes us to clearly understand not just the opportunities, it allows us to understand the challenges that we face. Three key things. Look at the numbers from oil. In the third quarter of this year, we exported approximately 9.7 trillion naira worth of oil. We imported significantly less, 2.8 trillion naira. And so in terms of oil trade, we have a surplus of 6.8 trillion naira. That is good news. But Ayotunde, here is where we have bad news. Agricultural and manufacturing trade. In the third quarter of the year, we exported 219 billion naira worth of agricultural goods. However, we imported 643 billion naira worth of agricultural goods, giving us a trade deficit in excess of 400 billion naira. Simply put, we are significantly importing more agricultural items than we're exporting. Ayotunde, it's even worse when we take a look at the numbers in manufacturing. In the third quarter of the year, we exported only 200 billion naira worth of manufactured goods, but we imported an approximate figure of 4 trillion naira worth of manufactured goods. And so in manufacturing, we have another trade deficit in excess of 3.7 trillion naira.
All right, Babajide,
so the good news from the trade report is we have a surplus when we look at our oil trade with the world, but when it comes to our agricultural and manufacturing trade, we have a deficit, a significant deficit.
Interesting. So now some oil giants have shared a positive outlook, Babajide, about investing in Nigeria's oil sector, though some big brands in the manufacturing sector are closing down. That's what we're experiencing at the moment. What are the real challenges in the manufacturing sector? Very quickly now.
3 main things based on the report that we've seen and studying that report. The first is we need to look at our ease of doing business. The second is that we need to look at our shipping and logistics. And the third is we need to focus on our history. Let's take a look at the numbers and look at what exactly has been going on in the past 5 years. Again, we have a lot of shocking details regarding our trade, especially, Ayotunde, on our manufacturing trade. Let's take a look at the numbers that allows us to clearly understand the challenges and the solutions that the president needs to think of. Starting from 2018, manufactured goods, total exports by Nigerians, by the Nigerian firms that were producing, 645 billion naira in 2018. In that same year, we imported manufactured goods in excess of 7.4 trillion naira. And so 2018, our deficit on trade with respect to manufactured goods, an excess of 6.8 trillion naira. And that has happened year on year since 2018 up till today. The summary of what we have today shows that in the last 5 years, 2018 to 2022, Nigeria has exported only 5.6 trillion naira worth of manufacturing goods, but we have imported 59 trillion naira worth of goods. And so the summary and what you need to keep in mind as we end this show tonight is what we have in front of us shows that with respect to manufacturing and why companies are shutting down, for every 1 container of manufactured goods that leaves our ports, 10 containers come in.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Yes, we'll have to leave it at that, Babajide.
For every one container of manufactured good that leaves, 10 containers come in. And that is the solution the president needs to find out.
Or definitely we'll leave it at that, and big work for the president to do for the year 2024. But thank you so much for your thoughts on the news at 10, Babajide. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Ayotunde.